Hi. Ancient Gospels are crazy. If you ever got deeper into this topic, you know these things were wild. And I'm not even talking about the later medieval science fiction of courtroom drama, dialogues between Pontius Pilatus and Jesus, and post resurrection dialogues envisioned by the people living 1,000 years later. These were ancient texts created on the spot within a few hundred years of the historical Jesus. A small disclaimer: no religion here, just a scholar entertaining take on early written documents of Christianity. Treat it as fun. For example, did you know that there was this thing called the Infancy of Gospel of Thomas, written around 170 AD, in which Jesus is portrayed as mischievous, miracle-performing child. Jesus, as a 5-year-old, makes clay birds, claps his hands, and brings them to life. Another child bumps into him. Jesus kills him instantly. The townspeople complain. Jesus strikes them blind. Later, he revives the dead kid to prove that he can. His teacher tries to scold him, tries to teach him the alphabet. Jesus humiliates him by reciting complex theological interpretations of every letter. The story ends with a moral twist. Jesus grows up to use his powers righteously. So yeah, it's like a spin-off. Great sitcom idea, by the way. Speaking of spin-offs, there is one about young Mary, Gospel of James 130 AD, in which he brings more details on birth and childhood of the Divine Mother. Basically, origin story, right? Her parents were elderly. They could not conceive, but with a prayer and angelic miracle, Mary was born. At age 3, she was dedicated to the temple, where she lived as a nun and grew up surrounded by angels, guarded like divine celebrity. Jesus was born in a cave in this story. No 3 kings, but 2 midwives, and one of them, Salome, doubted Mary's virginity and even, get this, wanted to test it after the birth. So her arm naturally withered away as a punishment from a god. It's like mix between biblical miracle and ancient tabloid scandal. This is my favorite. You know about doubting Thomas, right? He was an apostle, but he wasn't entirely sold on that divinity thing. He thought more of Jesus as a divine prophet rather than incarnation itself. By the way, all 3 of the oldest Gospels pretty much treat him as such, until John came and expanded the universe. He raised the whole story to a divine level and set the foundation for Christian theology as we know it. But we won't get into this today. It's a bit too much. Some scholars even think John's portrayal of doubting Thomas was a subtle diss, a rivalry between communities, the prophetic versus the divine take. By the way, John's Gospel is a canon, so this was canonical diss from the get-go. These guys were like rappers. The Gospel of Judas was awesome. I love naming my spaceship dreadnoughts or battleships Evangelium Judas. This is a very old Gnostic Gospel, 150 AD, where Judas is portrayed not as a villain, but rather as Jesus' closest confidant and best friend, the only one who understood his teachings fully. Judas alone knows the truth. Jesus wants to abandon his physical form, and betrayal is a part of the plan. Think about it. If Jesus had to die, betrayal was necessary. Jesus was celebrated for his sacrifice, but Judas never was. He was God's tool, but he had to work in secret, knowing that his name would be cursed for thousands of years. Now that's a good freaking story if you ask me. Who's the real hero? God who went home, or the mortal who took the blame for eternity? Gospel of the Ebionites. This one gives us Jesus the vegetarian philosopher. Ebionites were an early Jewish Christian sect that believed Jesus was the human Messiah, chosen by God, not divine. They practiced a form of asceticism which seems to have included vegetarianism. In their gospel, Jesus condemned and rejected animal sacrifice, which led some scholars to believe that interpretation of Jesus was indeed vegetarian, although this is admittedly a stretch, but it does sound fun and is somewhat consistent. The Gospel of Mary Magdalene. Here's an interesting one. We all know of Mary Magdalene as the prostitute, the sinner who was influenced and brought to the light by Jesus. Except there's not a word about it in the Bible, so how come? The label came centuries later, courtesy of a church PR move. In reality, Magdalene was a proto-feminist, one of Jesus' most prominent and valuable disciples. In her gospel, she takes center stage after the crucifixion, while Peter and the guys are kinda jealous and insecure. Jesus appears to her, teaches secret wisdom, and basically gives her the leadership badge. But the men dismiss her because she's a woman. The whole text reads like an ancient argument between reason and ego, with Mary being the only adult in the room. There were even interpretations, not definitive one, but at least debatable, of how Mary was more than just a disciple, if you know what I mean. There were gospels where Jesus was depicted more casually, where he laughed with his disciples, making practical jokes and teasing people. But it seems that someone somewhere thought how this humane and grounded version of Jesus will be less divine, which is a silly thing to think, but those guys did live in a desert 2000 years ago, so what can you do? Thank you. This was all for today. Till next time.
Will you see the lightning, guys? Will you love the lightning and take it into your heart?
When the lightning strikes, will you be ready?
Will